Most farmers are still spending hundreds, sometimes thousands, on hay every single year, cutting, drying, storing, and repeating the same exhausting cycle over and over again. But what if I told you there's a plant that can feed your herd all year round without replanting, without depending on seasonal harvests, and without draining your wallet? This is not some new invention. It is not a secret locked away in research labs. It has been around for years, quietly growing, quietly feeding animals, and quietly saving money for the few farmers who understand its power. And here's the part most people miss. When you combine this plant with one simple companion system, it doesn't just replace hay. It transforms your entire approach to livestock feeding. But before we get into that, you need to understand why so many farmers are stuck in a cycle that keeps them struggling. Because the real problem is not just hay. The real problem is dependence. Every year, the same story repeats itself. Prices go up, supply becomes uncertain, weather affects production, and farmers are forced to adjust, cut costs, or even reduce the number of animals they keep. Hay, once seen as a reliable livestock feed, has slowly become a burden for many small farmers, homesteaders, and off-grid growers. You spend money to buy it. You spend time to store it. You lose quality over time. And when shortages hit, you are left scrambling. For small farm owners and homestead setups, especially those trying to move toward self-sufficient farming, this creates a constant pressure. You are always one bad season away from a serious problem. Even for those running a senior homestead lifestyle, where the goal is to simplify and reduce physical stress, handling hay becomes more difficult with time. The lifting, the stacking, the transport, it adds up. And here's the truth most people don't talk about. Hay locks you into a system where you are always reacting. You are reacting to the market. You are reacting to weather. You are reacting to supply. But what if you could step out of that system entirely? What if your land could produce its own livestock feed continuously without needing to be replanted every season? What if your farm could generate year-round forage that supports your animals no matter the time of year? And what if that same system could work for goats, cattle, and mixed livestock, all from a single reliable source? This is where everything changes, because the solution is not complicated. It is not expensive, and it is not out of reach. It is a plant, a perennial fodder that grows aggressively, regenerates quickly, and produces massive amounts of biomass with very little input once established. It is known as Napier grass, also called elephant grass. This plant has earned its name for a reason. It grows tall, thick, and dense, producing more green material than most traditional forage options. But what makes it truly powerful is not just how much it grows, it is how it grows. Unlike annual crops that need to be replanted every season, Napier grass is a perennial fodder. Once you plant it, it continues to grow back after every cut. You cut it and it returns. You harvest it and it regenerates. You feed your animals and the cycle continues. This is what makes it a true hay alternative, not because it replaces hay once, but because it replaces the entire system behind hay production. Instead of waiting for harvest seasons, drying periods, and storage cycles, you move into a cut and carry system. You walk into your field. You cut fresh forage. You feed your animals immediately. No waiting, no storing, no quality loss. And this is where things start to shift. Because fresh green forage is not just about convenience. It is about nutrition. Napier grass provides a highly productive forage that supports healthy animals, improves digestion, and encourages consistent feeding behavior. Animals respond differently to fresh feed. Goats become more active and eager to eat. Cattle consume more consistently. Overall livestock health improves when feed is fresh and abundant. And here is something most farmers overlook. Consistency is everything. When your animals have access to a steady, reliable source of feed, their performance improves. Growth becomes more predictable. Milk production stabilizes. Stress is reduced. And all of this comes from a system that requires less effort over time. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Because Napier grass is not just about growth. It is about adaptability. While it thrives in tropical and subtropical climates, it has also been successfully integrated into different regions, including areas where farmers are exploring fodder crops in the USA and similar environments. With proper management, spacing, and care, it can be adapted into various farming systems, from small homesteads to larger livestock operations. And that means one thing. This is not a niche solution. This is a scalable one. Whether you are running a small backyard setup or building a more structured livestock system, this plant fits into your workflow. But let's bring this closer to reality. Imagine this. You wake up in the morning. Instead of worrying about how much hay is left, you walk out to your field. You see rows of thick, green grass standing tall. You cut what you need for the day. Fresh, vibrant, nutrient-rich feed. You carry it back, and your animals respond immediately. They eat eagerly. No hesitation. No waste. And the next day, it is still there, growing, regenerating, expanding. This is what year-round forage looks like. This is what self-sufficient farming begins to feel like. And this is why more farmers are starting to move away from traditional systems and toward sustainable livestock practices. Because once you experience this level of control, it becomes very difficult to go back. But there is still something missing. Because even though Napier grass is powerful on its own, there's a way to make it even more effective. A way to improve soil health, boost productivity, and create a more balanced system that supports long-term sustainability. And this is where most people stop too early. They plant the grass, they see results, and they think that is the full system. But it is not. There's another layer to this. A companion plant that works alongside Napier grass, enhancing its benefits and strengthening the entire ecosystem. A plant that quietly improves the soil, supports growth, and contributes to a more resilient forage system. And when these two are combined correctly, the results are on a completely different level. But before we get into that, you need to fully understand how the system feeds your animals, how it replaces traditional hay in practical terms, and why it works so effectively across different types of livestock. Because once you see how it all fits together, you will start to realize that this is not just about saving money. This is about changing the way you think about feeding your herd entirely. And that shift is where real independence begins. Now that you understand what Napier grass is and why it's such a powerful perennial fodder, the next question becomes even more important. How exactly does this plant replace traditional hay in a real, working livestock system? Because theory is one thing, but what matters most is how it performs when your animals are actually depending on it every single day. And this is where Napier grass truly separates itself. When you shift from hay to a fresh cut and carry system, everything about feeding changes. Instead of relying on dry, stored material that has already lost part of its nutritional value over time, you're feeding your animals fresh, living forage. And that difference is bigger than most people realize. Fresh forage contains more moisture, more natural nutrients, and is generally more appealing to livestock. Animals don't just eat it, they respond to it. Goats, for example, are naturally selective feeders. They prefer fresh, green material over dry feed whenever they have the option. When you introduce Napier grass into their diet, you'll often notice an immediate change in behavior. They become more eager during feeding time. They consume more consistently, and they waste less. For cattle, the benefits are just as noticeable. Cattle require a steady intake of quality feed to maintain weight, support milk production, and sustain overall health. With Napier grass, you are providing a consistent source of productive forage that meets those needs on a daily basis. Instead of fluctuating between good quality hay and lower quality batches, depending on storage and supply, your animals receive a stable, reliable feed source. And that consistency leads to healthier animals. Healthier animals mean fewer issues. Fewer issues mean lower costs. And lower costs mean a more sustainable livestock system. This is how everything connects. But here is something important to understand. Napier grass is not about replacing hay for one day or one season. It is about replacing dependence. Because once your field is established, you are no longer at the mercy of market prices or supply shortages. You are producing your own livestock feed. And that is a major shift. For small farmers, this means more control. For homesteaders, this means more independence. For off-grid farming setups, this means true self-reliance. And even in regions where farmers are experimenting with fodder crops in the USA, the concept remains the same. Grow your feed, cut your feed, use your feed. Simple, direct, and efficient. But let's talk about something that really matters. Cost. Because at the end of the day, no matter how effective a system is, if it doesn't make financial sense, it becomes difficult to sustain. And this is where Napier grass becomes almost impossible to ignore. Think about how much is spent on hay over time. Every season, you are buying, transporting, and storing feed. Prices fluctuate. Availability changes. And you are constantly adjusting your budget to keep up. Now compare that to a perennial system. You plant once. You manage it properly. And then it continues to produce. Yes, there is an initial setup. You need cuttings. You need to prepare the land. You need to give it time to establish. But after that, your costs drop significantly. You are no longer buying feed in the same way. You are no longer storing large quantities of hay. You are no longer dealing with the same level of waste. This is how you begin to reduce hay cost in a meaningful, long-term way. Not by cutting corners, but by changing the system itself. And here is where many farmers have a moment of realization. They start to see that the issue was never just about expensive hay. It was about relying on a system that required constant input. Napier grass changes that. It shifts you into a system that produces more than it consumes. And that is the foundation of self-sufficient farming. But we are not done yet, because while Napier grass is powerful on its own, there is a way to make it even stronger. This is where the system evolves from good to highly efficient, and it comes down to one key addition, a companion plant, known as Desmodium. Now, this is where things start to get really interesting, because Desmodium is not just another plant you add randomly. It serves a specific purpose, and it works in a way that supports both the soil and the main forage crop. Desmodium is a nitrogen-fixing plant. That means it has the ability to improve soil fertility naturally by adding nitrogen back into the ground. And this is critical because soil health directly affects how well your Napier grass grows. Better soil means stronger growth. Stronger growth means more forage. More forage means more feed for your animals. But that is only part of the story. Desmodium also helps with weed suppression. By growing alongside Napier grass, it reduces the space available for unwanted plants to take over. This makes your field easier to manage and reduces the need for constant maintenance. And there is another benefit that many people overlook. Desmodium contributes to pest management. It creates an environment that discourages certain pests, helping protect your forage without relying heavily on chemical inputs. So now, instead of just planting a single crop, you are building a system where Napier grass provides the bulk of the feed, Desmodium supports the soil and protects the environment, and together, they create a more balanced, sustainable livestock setup. This is what sustainable livestock farming looks like in practice. Not just feeding animals, but building a system that supports itself over time. And once the system is established, something else begins to happen. Your workload changes. Instead of constantly reacting to problems, you begin to manage a system that works with you. You spend less time worrying about feed shortages, less time dealing with poor quality hay, and more time focusing on improving your farm. For those running a small farm or a homestead, this is a major advantage. It simplifies your daily routine. You know where your feed is coming from. You know how much you have, and you know that it will continue to grow. Even for those managing a senior homestead, where reducing physical strain is important, this system offers a more manageable approach. You are not lifting heavy hay bales. You are cutting fresh forage at your own pace, and that difference matters over time. But let's take a moment to bring everything together, because what you are looking at is not just a plant, and it is not just a feeding method. It is a shift in mindset, from buying to growing, from reacting to controlling, from depending to producing. And this is where many farmers begin to see new possibilities. Because once you realize that you can produce your own feed consistently, you start to ask a different question. If I can feed my current animals this way, what happens if I scale this system? What happens if I expand? What happens if I produce more than I need? And that is where things start to open up. But before you get there, before you think about scaling, you need to understand how to start correctly. Because while this system is simple, it still requires the right approach in the beginning. Planting, Spacing, timing, and management all play a role in how successful your setup will be. And if you get those early steps right, everything else becomes much easier. So, in the next part, we're going to break down exactly how to start your own Napier grass system, the mistakes you need to avoid, and how to turn this into something that not only feeds your animals, but potentially transforms your entire farm. Now that you understand how powerful the system is, the next step is the most important one, getting started the right way. Because this is where many people go wrong. They hear about Napier grass, they see the benefits, they rush into planting, and then they don't get the results they expected. Not because the system doesn't work, but because they skip the foundation. And in farming, the foundation is everything. So, let's break this down in the simplest way possible. The first thing you need is planting material. Napier grass is not typically grown from seeds. It is established using stem cuttings. These cuttings are taken from mature plants and planted directly into the soil. This is important because the quality of your cuttings determines how strong your field will be. Healthy cuttings lead to strong roots. Strong roots lead to aggressive growth, and aggressive growth leads to more forage. Once you have your cuttings, the next step is land preparation. Napier grass is not overly demanding, but like any productive forage, it performs best in well-prepared soil. You want soil that drains properly, holds enough moisture, and allows roots to spread easily. Clear the land, loosen the soil, remove heavy weeds before planting. This gives your grass the best possible start. Now comes spacing. This is one of the most common mistakes people make. They plant too close together, thinking it will give them more yield. But in reality, overcrowding reduces growth because the plants compete for nutrients, water, and sunlight. Proper spacing allows each plant to reach its full potential. It allows air to circulate. It reduces disease risk, and it creates a stronger, more productive field over time. Once planted, the next phase is patience. This is not an overnight system. Napier grass needs time to establish. During the early stage, your focus should be on allowing the roots to develop properly. This means watering when necessary, keeping weeds under control, and avoiding early harvesting. And this is where many people make another mistake. They cut too early. They see growth and they rush to harvest. But early cutting weakens a plant and slows down long-term productivity. If you allow the grass to establish fully before the first cut, you set the stage for stronger regrowth in the future. And that is what this system depends on. Regrowth. Because once your field is established, everything becomes easier. You move into a rhythm. Cut, carry, feed, repeat. This is the cut and carry system in action. You are no longer waiting for seasons. You are working with a living system that continues to produce as long as it is managed properly. And as you begin harvesting regularly, something important happens. Your confidence grows. You start to see that your animals are well fed. You notice that your feed costs are dropping. You realize that your dependence on external inputs is fading. And that is where the real shift begins. But before you get too comfortable, there are a few critical mistakes you need to avoid. Because even though this system is powerful, it is not immune to poor management. The first mistake is over-harvesting. Cutting too frequently or too low can weaken the plant. Napier grass needs enough leaf surface to continue photosynthesis and regenerate properly. If you cut too aggressively, you slow down the very system you are trying to build. The second mistake is neglecting soil health. Even though this is a resilient plant, it still depends on the condition of your soil. This is where the Desmodium companion plant becomes extremely valuable. By planting Desmodium alongside your Napier grass, you naturally improve soil fertility, support long-term growth, and reduce the need for external inputs. Ignoring this step means you are missing out on one of the biggest advantages of this system. The third mistake is inconsistency. This system works best when it is managed regularly. If you cut too late, the grass becomes too mature and less palatable. If you cut too early, you weaken the plant. Finding the right balance is key, and that balance comes with observation. You learn your field. You understand its growth pattern. You adjust based on what you see. This is how experienced farmers operate, not by following rigid rules, but by responding to the land. And once you reach this level of understanding, something else becomes possible. Scaling. Because now you are not just feeding your animals, you are producing surplus. And this is where your farm begins to open new doors. With a well-managed Napier Grass system, you can expand your livestock without worrying about feed shortages. You can increase your herd size with confidence because you know your feed supply is stable. For small farm owners, this is a huge advantage. You are no longer limited by how much hay you can afford. You are limited only by how well you manage your land. And for those thinking beyond personal use, there's another opportunity: selling excess fodder. As more farmers begin to look for affordable livestock feed options, the demand for fresh, high-quality forage continues to grow. And if you are producing more than you need, that surplus becomes income. Now your system is not just saving you money, it is making you money. This is how small changes turn into real opportunities. And for those building a homestead or exploring off-grid farming, this takes things even further. Because now you are not just reducing costs. You are building independence. You are creating a system where your land supports your animals support your livelihood, and everything works together. This is what self-sufficient farming truly looks like. Not perfection, not instant results, but a system that grows stronger over time. And when you step back and look at everything, the difference becomes clear. On one side, you have the traditional system: buying hay, dealing with shortages, adjusting to rising costs, constantly reacting. On the other side, you have a regenerative system: growing your own perennial fodder, feeding your animals year-round, reducing costs, gaining control. And the gap between those two systems is where your decision lies. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about Napier grass. It is about the kind of farmer you want to become. Do you want to stay in a cycle that depends on external inputs? Or do you want to build a system that supports itself? Do you want to react to problems or create solutions on your own land? Because once you make that shift, everything changes. And this is exactly what we are building here. Not just information, not just ideas, but real, practical systems that help you take control of your farm, your feed, and your future. And if this is the kind of knowledge you want more of, if you are serious about building a more efficient, more sustainable, and more profitable livestock system, then you need to stay connected to the right source. Because on this channel, Herd and Harvest, we break down real strategies like this: simple, powerful, and designed for farmers who want results. No fluff, no complicated theory, just practical solutions you can actually use. So if you are ready to stop depending on expensive feed systems, if you are ready to start building your own year-round forage, and if you want to learn more ways to grow, feed, and scale your livestock the smart way, then make sure you subscribe to Herd and Harvest right now. Because the difference between struggling and thriving in livestock farming often comes down to what you choose to learn next. And the next video you watch might be the one that changes everything.